Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Augmented Reality podcast, taking a critical look at the week's gaming news as well as general nerd news in general. Nerd news in general. That's too many generals.
There's also too many N's. You almost said the other N word, the four-letter N word.
What's the four-letter N word?
Nude.
Nude? Okay.
Yeah, that's offensive to people. That
yes,
the word
apparently. Very true. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi today. We're going to be talking about a hilarious Twitter hashtag that we've come across.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Oh, yes, no spoilers in the Jedi, in the Last Jedi review.
We're not necessarily talking about The Last Jedi review. We're not necessarily talking about the Last Jedi. What we're talking about is more or less where we feel the series is and where it might be going as a whole, because some people were not happy with this last movie, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we will. And a couple of other gaming news stories, but we are also broadcasting live for the first time ever, so welcome to those of you who are listening live. If there's time at the end, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about in chat, within reason, of course. Not gonna, on the topics of gaming and general nerd stuff. If you want to talk about crocheting doilies for your grandmother for Christmas, this is not the podcast for you. But
we've done live stuff before, haven't we? We've done lots of live stuff before.
Yeah, but we've never done the podcast live.
Oh yes, well I guess that makes sense.
So, have you guys seen this hashtag? Hashtag Zelda is the boy. It is absolutely hilarious, and it started, I believe, last weekend with some comedy writer just made an innocuous post about of a screenshot or a screen grab of Link in Breath of the Wild, and captioned it with like, "What are you doing, Zelda?" And
you mean Zelda?
Oh yeah, the main character of the of Breath of the Wild, the guy who wears the green tunic and hat, runs around with a
his
sword.
name is clearly Zelda. So, clearly Zelda. It's clearly.
Yes. Well, I know. I'm being paid off by Big Atari. That is my situation here.
You're trying to mislead people because Zelda is the green hero male, kid adventurer that you play.
Yes, I know. Because
that makes sense, and that's just the way it is. You need to.
So yeah, so this has been. It's not exactly trending or anything, but it's absolutely hilarious if you go search it out. People are just... See, what's funny about it is that so many people didn't realize that this original person was trolling them. And actually it was... I think it might have been a genuine mistake at the beginning, or actually they were probably just trolling. Yeah, just was, what are you doing, Zelda? And someone corrected them saying, no, that's not Zelda, that's Link. And then she went on this whole thing about how the main character of the game is clearly Zelda. You don't. Why would it be called The Legend of Zelda? Why would it be called why would it be named after the princess who sits around and doesn't do anything? It's you don't call it Super Princess Peach Brothers or anything like that. So absolutely hilarious. Anyway, that's where that screen grab from the in the thumbnail that I grabbed that off of Twitter. People have been making these things. They've been making
it's the
fake screenshots and
it's things. The age-old debate. I remember when I was a kid in the school bus listening to people argue about this, because the first Zelda game had been out and had been pretty successful, and the second Zelda game had just come out. And I remember sitting in the bus and like four of these kids in the back just going at it, going, no, Zelda is the boy. No. The boy's name is Link. And because it was only one or two places in which you ever saw that name come up. And I think in Zelda 2, I don't even think it's in I don't think there's actually a spot in the game. But at any rate, there's all this back and forth and people, getting very, upset about the fact that, Adventures of Zelda is not actually about Zelda, it's about Link. and people were genuinely like confused and frustrated, and because they're like, it's called the Super Mario Brothers. It's not about Princess Peach. And like just the back and forth on it was truly hilarious to listen to. But I mean, this has been going on for a really long time, and it's funny when it takes form every now and then. I've seen somebody mention it at like a panel at some kind of a convention a couple of years ago, and it's just funny every time it rears its head again. It's just cute and hilarious, and I think it's brilliant. So.
This some of these tweets are hilarious. People are so dumb. I remember when Flute of Time and Majora's Hat came out. I've been playing forever. # Zelda is the boy. In Mario, you play as Mario. In Kirby, you play as Kirby. In Metroid, you play as Metroid. It's ironclad logic. In Zelda, you play as Zelda. So, anyway, we can't do it justice just describing these. You gotta go check it out. # Zelda is the boy. Very funny stuff. So, Star Wars...
If you like to sit and laugh at people, that's the way to go. Okay.
So, Star Wars The Last Jedi, of course, is in theaters, and it was a highly anticipated movie, but the reviews and response to it hasn't been exactly what I think the creators of the movie had been hoping for or expecting. We're going to talk about this a little bit and what exactly people have been disappointed with. I see Andre in chat wants to talk about spoilers. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to talk about spoilers in this podcast. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we should do a video or a live stream talking about Star Wars.
It's mainly talking about
spoilers and stuff, but
yeah, it's mainly that it hasn't been out for a week. And normally my thing is like I don't talk spoilers for a major movie until a week afterwards, unless I'm doing like something that's very clearly noted as spoiler. Just because it's like it's not even possible for all the fans that were wanting to watch it to have seen it yet. Usually it takes a full week for that to happen, and usually that's because of like work schedules and stuff like that.
Yeah, it takes a while for people to get around to it. That's absolutely understandable. So yeah, we don't want to just inadvertently ruin something in the movie, because I do encourage people to see it, even despite some of the negative press.
A lot of the negative press seems to revolve around them kind of poo-pooing their own canon, which is frustrating because they made this big deal about wanting to, join the canon and make sure that it was, a single solitary thing. And then in the last movie, there was some canonical issues. And then in this movie, there's some fairly big canonical issues. They changed the science behind some stuff, like just completely.
They did, but is that expanded universe canon, or is that
no? That's
canon?
like no, that's been there for a while. It's not like they sat down and clearly said it in some kind of a format, one way or the other. It's just that it followed naturally to be, that's the pure and direct route that they work off of.
Well, but if it's even at the slightest bit ambiguous, then they could take it in a different direction, and that's really, I think, what a lot of the criticism revolving The Last Jedi has been is that it just went in a different direction than people were expecting, and not everybody thinks it was a very good direction.
Well, I mean, except for me, as far as like the thinking that they were going to go in this direction. I had, and a few other people had been postulating the big thing about the Force for a while now, and it's interesting because again, this is again them moving in a direction that's really, it's really weird as far as the canon goes. So the canon says that that things are this way or that way. And then there's like deep canon that really gets into, like, really delves deep into the stuff. And by this, I mean, like, the only place that we've seen this really play out in a really organized fashion is in the second KOTOR game. The second KOTOR game, which A, not a lot of people played. B, most diehard fans of the movie series, not the gaming series, have no indication of whatsoever, but was one of the strongest narratives and one of the best moments in the expanded lore, as far as the games went, because it's just what it does to change things and what it does to set things up, and then how it affects the story in the future. It's honestly brilliant writing. I honestly wish that the writers for that, and that the writers for the original KOTOR, that they get a chance at least writing the script for some of this stuff. I hate to say it, but when J.J. Abrams takes over a lot of things, he has this way of taking the world and shrinking it down to basically just the thing that he's covering. Like, and he did that in Star Trek. In Star Trek, the reboot series that he did, there was never any fleets of Star Trek ships. Like, you'd think the Federation would have a fleet somewhere,
right.
and the way that it was covered, it was like they were the only ship out there. It was like that they were the only people capable of defending the planet, even though their strategy that they used could have been done by anybody. Not just anybody with a ship, anybody on the bloody ground. Like, the whole, like, they dropped the this is Star Trek, the first one, spoiler alert. They dropped this mining cable laser thing into the atmosphere, and they started beaming a laser into the ground. And it's like, okay, if something like that were to happen if some kind of a tactic or an attack that had some kind of a function that was somewhat similar to that had happened in any major city with a good military, you'd have more than one group trying to put a stop to it relatively quickly. I mean, for crying out loud, they dropped this thing within like a mile or within a couple of miles of the training base, yet nobody in the training base had military equipment, a ship that could go knock it out, transports that could beam people to it. Like I know they were like, oh, this is interference thing, but it's like is everybody else incapable of doing any kind of a job whatsoever?
Well, I don't remember that first movie enough to really comment on that specifically, but I do know that was kind of the theme, the premise of the original Star Trek series. They were kind of lone wolfing it out in the galaxy. They didn't, it was, to a large extent, they were the only ship. Like, the other ships were very far away. They were out exploring on the frontier. So
yeah, but in that movie, it was not frontier. It was
I know it was closer to home, but I don't know. I really liked what Abrams did with The Force Awakens. I really liked that it felt like
pick up some shade there.
What's that?
I said you might pick up some shade there.
Well, it's not like Force Awakens was a hated movie. I liked. I have my problems with it, and I've talked about them before. But I do like that it really felt like a Star Wars movie. It really, I enjoyed a lot of the directions that it went. I don't like that it was a complete rehash of A New Hope, and was hoping that they were going to get away from doing that kind of thing in the new movie, and they didn't entirely. But I think, personally, I feel like the problem with The Last Jedi is that it suffers from a lack of a coherent direction as far as the overall trilogy. Like, you go back to the original trilogy, there were some things that were kind of cut and pasted together, but at least it had an overall a clear and overarching direction to the whole 3-movie arc. And you can say the same thing about the prequels, as crap as they were. They at least had a consistent vision.
An interesting thing about the prequels is I've been watching a lot of like content on on the prequel stuff and like people dissecting it. And then the other thing that became a really popular theory in the last little bit was that Jar Jar was actually the ultimate evil, which for a long time it really forget about what you see in the second movie in that series, but the first movie, it really does set it up. If you're
Jar Jar
familiar
being
with
evil, yeah.
Jar
Jar's the emperor, yeah.
there's a lot of things that he does that's like that mirrors almost perfectly this like drunken wushu style. I think I might be butchering that, but it's like drunken style, like combat and fighting, where you appear as if you don't know what you're doing, but in actuality, you're very skilled, and you're just doing stupid things to make it look like you're not actually that smart at what you're doing. And
right.
That combined with the narrative of this what you call gray Jedi or central pathing, like something like that. That's there's a real story to be had there. There's a real narrative to push there. There's a real experience that I think a lot of like Star Wars fans are interested in seeing, and B, they they want to see this. They want to have this experience. They want to see this side of the story because it's very interesting. It's very fascinating. If you have time, look up any of the Kira story, any of her story in which in the KOTOR 2 game, and the whole story about the exile. It's all really good, and it points out the big flaws in both the Sith mentality and the Jedi mentality. But
Right.
I don't think the fans understand that. Like, I don't think they see how deep it goes.
To some extent, that is expanded universe, and so it's not technically canon anymore.
No, but
if you go back
it's what
to
they're pulling in, though.
I see what you're saying. They are drawing from that.
Story.
They are drawing from that into the canon storyline now, and that's a really interesting direction. I think it might be confusing to some fans because if you go back and watch the original trilogy, it's the Jedi are good, the Sith are bad. They don't go into that gray area, and it's always kind of puzzled me that in the games predominantly there are light side force powers and there are dark side force powers, but like for example Force lightning, only the evil only the Sith use that, only the dark side, the evil can use that, whereas really isn't
actually there were some Jedis who started to pick it up in the expanded series. It was called Force Smite. And it was like a
let's call it
holy smite.
No, really, this isn't Force lightning. It's smite. Yeah, that's it. Well, isn't good and evil in the way you use it as opposed to which power you actually use? This is kind of an aside, but
because he got dragged in front of he got dragged in front of like a tribunal, and they were trying to figure out, well, you used lightning, and that's normally an evil power. What. And he had to explain, like, he's like, at the time, like, it wasn't I didn't feel malice or hatred. It was like a justification type anger, like, and so at that point they were like, oh, interesting. So then they called it Force Smite, and it was officially okayed, but it did have something to do with his emotions, and that's what really happens with the fall, to the dark sides and stuff like that. It's like giving into your emotions without constraint, and
that's that's kind of the dark side.
Yeah, that's kind of the dark side. Now, they seem to be saying, well, let's just take all this like years and years of like trial and like these thousands and thousands of years worth of lore inside the game, and let's just like, as far as the Jedi like control and most of the aspects, and let's just fire it through a cannon or something. It's like, oh, okay,
just get rid of it, you mean?
Yeah, just like they take a massive dump on it basically, and they're like, it's, and I don't know if that's a good thing for, without going into the whole Grey Jedi thing, without going into the without really going in depth into the reasonings behind it. I feel that you can pass off this concept to your fans that that none of that matters anymore, and that's where they're starting to lose some people. That's where people are. I mean, they're making petitions to get people to get Disney to strike it from the lore. Like, I don't know how well that's gonna work, guys.
That's pretty. That's pretty passionate. I'm not. That would be quite a decision for them to do that. But really, I think I kind of echo Andre's thoughts in chat here. He says, "Okay, no spoiler. I think people are mad about the movie because they want a 30 years ago continuation movie. I don't think is the best one, but it has some good stuff." I agree with that in general. There were moments in The Last Jedi that I just thought were absolutely phenomenal.
It was from, and I should point this out. Visually speaking, it was a very good movie. Like,
visually, it was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I liked the overall premise that they established at the start of the movie. The premise, the tension that they established at the start of the movie, I really liked. But unfortunately, as we went through the movie, it felt like more and more as we were getting to the end, it felt like I was watching a completely different movie. That it was cutting back and forth between two different movies, and near the end, I didn't feel like I was watching a Star Wars movie at all anymore. And that's what lost it for me. There were parts of it that just were not a Star Wars movie. And as soon as I'm not feeling like I'm in the Star Wars universe, I'm not enjoying it as a Star Wars movie anymore.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like Star Wars, the original trilogy, did this thing where they had two running stories at the same time that interconnected at a lot of points, but ultimately, it was a story between a boy and his father, and the struggle between light side and dark side, and all of the things that you can connect to that. There's tons of depth and story to a tale between the father and the son narrative that happens there. The lost family, the finding of the long lost siblings. Like, there's this narrative, but there's also this narrative of evil tyrannical authoritarians taking over the galaxy to impose their will on everybody, and to bring order at the cost of freedom, bring order at the cost of being able to think freely, almost in some cases, and to not be taken advantage of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then in this one, they've really pushed in this direction where it's like they're trying to do the same thing, but I don't think they're doing it very good, because they're centering it too much around a plot that's at the same time is, it's necessary, but in the other hand, I don't think they're handling it correctly, because, again, we still don't know where Rey is from. We still don't know where this is from, and there seems to be a lot of randomness, and then there's also the fact that it seems a little disconnected here and there. It seems like they were going in one direction, then they move in another direction, and maybe that's because they keep on. I mean, they've had multiple times where they've had major writers and directors. And this is happening in the Han movie. It's like I don't know if they know where they're going half the time. I think a bunch of people have their kind of idea of what they want to do for a great Star Wars movie, but they didn't take the time to sit down and say, okay, what is the lore? What is the overall...
Yeah, they're not connecting it to the overall universe very well, and I think that is problematic, because the Star Wars is about the universe that you're set in. It can't just become some other sci-fi series. It can't just become some generic sci-fi thing, or it's not Star Wars anymore. That just doesn't work.
And it's the way that the directors approach the Force as well now. And I've noticed this with the the Rogue One, and then I've noticed this between these last two movies, and with the relaunch, trilogy as well, is that it seems that the concept of the Force is constantly in flux, and what they're doing and what they're thinking is constantly changing. And because of that, I don't think they really know where they're going with it. Because if you watch the Clone Wars, and if you watch the the kids show that they have out there right now, and I've had to do a lot of reading because I can't stand a lot of the story and the acting. But it's like they're constantly moving this way, that way, that way, this way, and then it's like, well, hold on here. Are we moving in this direction, or are we moving in that direction? I really need to know that, because it's pretty important for the point of everything that we're doing, and
Right.
and that's the wall I think they're hitting. I don't think they're really connecting the dots that. And this is what happens when you have multiple people in charge instead of just one person in charge.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that is true. I feel like as it changed hands from J.J. Abrams to Rian Johnson, that's where a lot of the disconnect came from, because you had these unresolved story threads at the end of episode 7, and they could have gone in any one of a bunch of different directions everyone was speculating on, but nope, it's some of them just got yanked off in a completely different direction, and some of them just got cut off. And so, which is actually kind of surprising, because with the Marvel movies, Disney's been doing a really good job of creating a coherent universe. So I don't know why they're having trouble with Star Wars.
And that's the thing. And I think the thing is because they're bringing in too much too much talent that has their own ideas, right? And too many people who like. Do you really think Ryan or JJ is going to, commit themselves to not giving themselves creative license on everything? Like,
well,
like, do you really think a bunch of
yeah.
like the top directors in the world are going to say, okay, I will, submit myself to not messing with this, or this? I think their concept of that is like, of course I'm going to mess with it. It's Star Wars. I get to mess with anything I want. Like, oh my God, it's the greatest, and I'm sure, I mean, I would jump at the chance to direct.
They should put Joss Whedon in charge. Every upcoming Star Wars movie directed by Joss Whedon.
It needs it at the very least. It needs a core writer, and we see this in Game of Thrones too. And I'm not going to do any spoilers in Game of Thrones, but in Game of Thrones, everybody's like, oh, the first couple of seasons are the best, and that's because that's where it's mostly following the story that's been written down by one person.
Yeah.
And in the later series, when they're getting ahead of the written stuff, they're doing this creative license, and they're writing these things. I watched a movie yesterday that was it was a movie about a video game thing. Like the game came first, then the movie came out. And what I noticed was that the story in the game was top notch. It was really top notch. It was brutal too, because you had people heroically sacrificing themselves, and just sad, like terror, like just the sad ending stories. And you don't really get that a lot in movies these days, where it's like, yeah, the heroes went to stop the big bad, but some of them died, and then all of the rest of them, except for one or two that fell to massive corruption, they didn't make it after that. And that's the thing where it's like,
Right.
they
Well, where were you going with that, though?
They had this direction that they were going in that was really good in the game, and then moving away from that, they just completely dropped the story. When they translated it to a movie, what they did is they took the story that had been told in the game, and they completely dropped the ball on that.
Oh, I think I've seen it. I think I've seen that movie. I think I've seen it.
Story.
Isn't it called Every Video Game Movie Ever?
Yeah, they had this director and the writer who wanted to create their own story, and they had the same high points. It's like they followed a bloody script for Disney or Pixar movies.
Yeah,
like they literally followed a 1-2-3 step, 1-2-3 step, 1-2-3 step, finish.
Formulaic. Yeah, and that's part of the problem. So I guess part of we should wrap up the discussion on the Star Wars, but I think part of the problem is that it is going to be a little formulaic, and it might suffer from these direction problems in the future. Not direction like the director, but direction as in the vision for the universe and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just going to have to accept that Star Wars is going to be different than what we were expecting, than the Star Wars movies that we grew up with?
Well, at this point, the games are pretty much borscht. The movies are... I think the movies are floundering, and I think that's gonna, I'm really disappointed with the Star Wars brand that they've had so far, and I feel that they've let it go because they don't have this unified voice in it, and they really need a unified voice on it. They need 1 to 2 people who are like, okay, you're in charge of okaying everything in every story and making sure that we have a solid direction for the next and I think they'll learn to do this at some point. I think they'll look at the
so maybe it's just finding its legs still.
Yeah,
I think
maybe
that very well maybe, but I'm very curious to hear the listeners.
They're not losing money though.
Well, no, heck no. They're still gonna they're still gonna make money hand over fist for any Star Wars movie they put out. Including for me, I will absolutely see any Star Wars movie they put out.
I mean,
unless they really botch it, but
I mean, you look at the original, not the original. You look at episodes 1, 2, and 3, and it's like, well, even as bad as some of them were, people still lined up, forever, and it's not only that. It's people continued to buy the products, the related things. There's never been a decline in the sale of lightsabers. It's like really this is a right to print money, and
the Star Wars brand, yes.
The Star Wars brand is a right to print money, and as long as they do a competent job where you take each movie individually and you look at it and you go, oh yeah, it was a decent movie, as long as they can say that, they're not really going to move from this. It's like the thing with the whole gaming thing. Disney's been raked through the coals by what EA has done. EA has been raked through the coals. At the end of the day, it's like, well, we didn't make $1 billion, but we made $500 million. So yeah, I guess it's cool. And it's like, okay, I guess that's where we are now. Mm-hmm. And
well, let us know your thoughts in chat or in comments below if you're watching or listening to this after the fact on YouTube or iTunes or SoundCloud. Let us know what you think. Is Star Wars going to be different now than what we were hoping for, and is that okay? Are you okay with that? Has The Last Jedi, is it a misstep that you're willing to forgive? Did you actually really like it? Do you not like it? Has it kind of ruined it for you? Let us know what you think. We're very curious to know what our listeners think about that. So, speaking of bizarre ideas, wow. So there was a game set to come out called Upsilon Circuit that advertised itself, or at least was described as a permadeath game.
Yeah.
This was really interesting. So a permadeath game, of course, is a game you play where if your character dies, they stay dead, and then
you gotta re-roll, or you have to start over again from scratch, or something like that.
Yeah. Sometimes you have things that can carry over to your next character, but different games will handle it different ways. But this was a permadeath game in that if you die playing this game, if your character dies, obviously if you die, then you're not playing any game again. But if your character dies in the game, you cannot play the game again. and somebody thought this was a good idea. So what the hell happened here? What was the thought process behind this? That's my question.
There's a couple things here. So first of all, people, I mean, you look at we covered a game that had this kind of mechanic, sort of. I mean, the game uninstalled itself, and then it created a registry on your computer, hidden registry that made it so that you couldn't reinstall the game. Brilliant, brilliant writing. It was also short, and it was aimed at streaming. And you're like, well, wasn't this game also short and aimed at streaming?
Kinda.
Yes. There were a couple of things that they had. For example, only 10 people could play it at a time.
Yeah.
There was a heavy streaming integration system planned for it, but they started to run into problems with that in a handful of ways.
Well, let me read what how they describe it on their website here. Upsilon Circuit is the first video game show. Only 8 players are allowed in at a time. I apologize. I told you 10 yesterday, but it's actually 8. And their fates are determined by a live audience ready to jump in at a moment's notice. Remember, though, die in the circuit and you'll never play again. So it was some sort of thing they were really planning on people to watch, and for the audience to be involved in some way, interacting with it, and determining the fates of the characters. I believe that involved the audience was in charge of upgrading the character skills, etc. I guess somehow that would work. I guess you would vote or something for your favorite character to upgrade in certain skills.
Or give them information on the next room and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they don't go into a lot of details. But they were banking on people watching this, and I'm guessing that's how they were going to monetize it. Because there would only be one game going on ever at a time, only 8 players at a time, and if you're playing and your character dies, then you can't play it ever again.
We have learned this lesson over and over and over and over and over and over again. Players will not watch somebody play a game that they have no connection or ability to play themselves. Mm-hmm. The top games for streaming have been, Freddy's, Minecraft. This is not in any order, other than how they come to my head. Battlegrounds, multiple different kinds of battleground type games. Definitely MOBA games, and all of these things have a humongous player base. They have a massive player base. Fortnite and Battle Royale have a player base of over 10 million right now that are active on a weekly basis. You have a crowd of people who are watching these games who are connected to them. They have friends that play. If they don't play themselves, they at least have friends that play the game, possibly siblings who play the game. They have the ability to see the game, to track the game, do the game. The streamers are playing the game over and over and over again. It's a week. Some streamers, they spend 1 day a week covering a particular game, and then 5 Nights at Freddy's Fridays and stuff like that. Minecraft Mondays, that kind of stuff. It's built into repetitiveness, which is what a streamer needs. A streamer needs to guarantee this a show. Essentially, they're putting on a show. They're putting on a display for their fans, and the fans are expecting something more or less. There's not a lot of fans out there who come to a weekly. They come 4 or 5 times a week to a streamer to watch a streamer who's playing a different thing every night. Sometimes they're changing up games multiple times in that night. That happens, it does, and there is a crowd for that. And there are streamers who don't stick to any kind of a schedule, but the big ones stick to a pretty decent schedule, and definitely ones that are making a full-time income. They're sticking to a really regular kind of schedule. They're going on things over and over again in a precise, calculated way. You don't have that with this game. You don't have any of that. All of that is removed. It's like, okay, this is a game that none of you have played. Very few videos have been made about the game because you can't get into it and experiment with its physics and its rule set and its game world. You can't do any of that stuff. All you can do is look at what people have done in the past and then experiment on that, and then hope that nothing has changed, or that nothing is glitchy, or that nothing is weird, or that you don't get teamed up with somebody who's spent hours and hours and hours or days or weeks in the lineup just to get in, just to kind of like ruin your experience and the experience of your fans watching. And that's the other thing. It's like the whole concept of this, we've seen this play out in multiple other games. We saw this concept of like, oh yeah, people will watch a game that they don't play, and we're going to have an esports built on a game that nobody bloody plays. Firefall is one of the ultimate examples of this. Let's get rid of the things that people wanted to play to make this game something that they wanted, and let's make it all about the esports. Let's make it the esport. What do you mean we're down to like 500 concurrent players for a whole week? What do you mean that people aren't interested in watching an esport to a game that they don't play and that they feel has changed from the original direction? I don't understand what you're talking about. You're not making sense, man. I'm a doctor, damn it.
Our highly paid analysts told us that this would work, therefore.
In some of these cases, it's not even... I know I've talked about this one in depth. I'm very uniquely familiar with the Firefall issues. And the issues there was, they didn't even listen to their analysts. They had an analyst come in and say, yeah, you guys are doing this wrong. You need to do this, this, and this. And the guy just stood up and said, you're wrong. I know the gaming industry better than you do. I've led to 2 game studios crashing and burning now in a glorious blaze of insanity. I know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. I do. And it's like you're sitting in there and you're like, I honestly feel that team members at the time were starting to feel like, Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He has to know what he's doing, because if he doesn't know what he's doing, I'm wasting my life. I'm putting my mortgage up again for the sake that I think this guy knows what he's doing, when every decision that he's made in the last 2.5 years has done nothing but to run this thing into the ground. And this is what happened here. I really feel that they weren't listening to what people were telling them. Yeah, okay, it's a good concept, but you know what you should have? You should probably have something that the community or the public can at least play and experiment with in general. Like, here's a great idea, and anybody can take this. Just throw me credit in the credits, please. Is take this same concept and create like a central server, right? I think anybody like Fortnite or Battle Royale could have like a live map where that's their like premier map, and you have to line up in order to get in. And it's like all the big streamers, so that all the big streamers are playing at the same time. And you line up and you take out some big streamer that you have a beef with, or that you're competing against, and there's thousands of people on each of their streams watching, and then PewDiePie comes in and drives over you with a truck. It's like that kind of stuff. Now that is hilarious, because if you have this interconnected single server, and if you had like if you really specialize, it gave people the ability to like look exactly like to make their avatar look exactly like them. So you could actually like hold up and tie up PewDiePie and drag him around in a car or something like that. There's ways that you can make that kind of an idea work, where you take a single event or a single server or a single game and portray it as the big game of the week, right? And you could have huge prizes and all this kind of stuff for people who are watching, and you could have a I know we're talking about how microtransactions are gambling and it's not good, but you could have like bets. You could line up bets, and you could bet like you could bet some of your in-game rewards that you've gotten or unlocked, and you're like, I'm putting my t-shirt, my frying pan, my this and my that all in for the different skins and stuff and costume effects, and I'm putting this all in, and if I win, or if he places in the top 5, I get new hairstyle, I get this, I get that, that kind of stuff. brilliant. That could work because
that
you know
has
what?
to
People are playing the game.
that can only work if you're right. That can only work for a game that people are playing anyway. Like you can't have I don't see how this was supposed to work. It was an interesting concept,
Yeah.
but not all innovation is necessarily, something's not a good idea just because it's innovative. Like it has to work.
It's like people say, why reinvent the wheel if it works? I've seen people create square wheels. Now, some square wheels work. I do have to point this out, that some square wheels do work. They're not exactly square. They're curved in certain precision areas, and they function off of inertia and rotation. But that's like taking the concept and really finitely putting it together into this amazing package, and you're like, see, this actually does work. We actually can do this. But that's the exception to the massive rule of like, don't reinvent the wheel, because you're gonna get a triangle wheel, or you're gonna get a an egg-shaped wheel, and none of those things work.
Yeah, like it's a very, very special circumstance where you'd need a square wheel, or where that at all a better idea than a circular wheel.
Yeah.
But anyway, the permadeath game is permadead. So
yeah,
that one crashed before it started. That was honestly probably good for the studio, because
I think they were gonna. If they had taken that to launch, they would have been horribly surprised by how little people cared.
It would have been a flash in the pan, is my prediction. Like they might have gotten some interest, like, oh, what's this? But in a couple of weeks, would there have been any kind of an audience for it?
With you never being able to return to the game. Also, it's like,
well, even just watching, like, how interesting could it possibly be?
It's like, hey, what does that character do? What does that skill do? I don't know. Nobody's ever pressed that skill button before. Yeah. And you're like, what does it do? What does it do? Oh, it makes your character wave. Okay, well, spent 36 hours waiting for that to happen, and now I feel a little underwhelmed. That's all possible. And yeah, hitting the wall with this one, guys. Go back to the drawing board.
Nah. These okay, I'm sorry, but these they've got some review snippets written on the website that I'm finding kind of funny. Upsilon Circuit is willing to mess with everybody's notions of what it means to be a gamer and a game. They don't say that's a good thing.
You know what? The one thing that people love is when you mess with the notions of what it means to be a gamer. That goes over well with this crowd.
It's kind of like it's kind of like a multiplayer fantasy RPG meets Twitch plays Pokemon. Mixed smartly, those flavors go together surprisingly well. Okay, they're not saying that this does mix it together smartly. And then I think this one's my favorite. It's a really interesting concept, kind of an ephemeral game, so to speak. I don't know. I would not be putting these reviews front and center on my website. None of them are saying it's a good game. Just
the thing that really puts the proverbial wet blanket on this fire is that they're using these like artistic this artistic kind of like artsy style of reviews and saying, oh yes, we're going for this artistic vibe and flair that is not really easy to put into words. You know what kind of movies use that language? Art movies where the average person goes to see it and says, I didn't understand a thing that was going on in that movie. It was really disturbing, very confusing, and I had no idea what in the world was going on. But everybody around me is now drinking wine and having some cheese and talking about how, the experience was a metaphysical improvement on the actor who did it. And I'm now feeling like I'm in the wrong crowd for somebody who wanted to just enjoy a movie.
That does sound like what these reviews are saying. It's like, we don't know what this is, but it's interesting. It's
like going to a modern art show and you see a pair of glasses and a hat on the floor, and everybody stands around and starts talking about how beautiful and how amazing this artwork is, and then some guy walks in and goes, oh, there's my glasses and hat. I thought I've lost them. And he picks up he puts the hat on, he puts his glasses on, and he walks out of there, and everybody's like, oh, that must also be a part of the art piece as well.
Yeah, exactly. The Emperor has no clothes. What? And finally in the news this week, something really interesting that we're certainly keeping our eye on. Nexus Mods is apparently set to revamp their donations and storefront structure, and it looks like they're planning to actually start paying mod creators based on downloads.
This is brilliant and amazing, and I'm really hoping that this works out really well, and I hope that Bethesda keeps their bloody nose out of this. The thing that's good about this is that you're not going to make a lot of money off of it. The way they have it set up and the way that they have it envisioned is what a lot of mod creators have been asking for. A lot of mod creators have been asking for, can I get a couple of coffees and some pizzas for my work on this mod? That's all I want.
Well, the way I would describe it is, how at restaurants, you give tips, and often they pool the tips and they distribute them to everybody, like to the chefs, to all the waitresses.
The people who did the work by the time, right?
By the time. So the waitress who gets a table full of really drunk businessmen who like tip her 300% of the bill. Well, everybody kind of benefits from that.
Yeah.
Everyone who was working that shift, and whereas the waitress who got the college freshman who couldn't barely afford to eat out to begin with, she doesn't get shafted. They pool the tip. When I first heard about pooling the tips, I thought, how is that at all fair? Then the crappy waitress gets, the as much tip as everybody else. But, it does make sense that, sometimes if you just, if so much of your wage depends on tips and you just have a bad night because you get the cheapskates at your tables, then yeah, I understand it now. And it does make sense, It'll be interesting to see how this works and how they work it legally, because you cannot legally be paid for making mods, but you can receive donations. You can donate to a mod creator. You can donate to anybody for anything, really. You can give somebody money for any reason you want, and so you can donate to the mod creators, and if the website starts to collect those and sort of distribute them, the money via, website credits or however they're going to do it. Not a ton of details on that yet. I don't know. I like that idea. I like the idea of mod creators who put a lot of work into these mods and do a really good job to, see something for that. Have their beer money for the week covered, whatever. I like that idea a lot because, I get a lot of enjoyment out of playing games with mods, and as do a lot of other people. So, and people put a lot of work into these, things that they can't actually legally sell or make money off of. So, and it's like Saib said, you're never going to make a living doing this kind of a thing.
And the way that
it's a hobby.
Yeah, well, you can make a living off of it. There's multiple mod creators who have made an amazing mod and then gone on to get, pick up a job in the industry because they did such an amazing job. And people people were like, "Oh, hey, you're really good at this. Let's sign you up." But then there's other mod creators who, they do stuff and they work really, really hard and they make a really good thing, and they don't really ever get really solid props for it. And in this case, this is just giving you that opportunity. We know a lot of people who were like, in order to keep working on this mod, I need a new monitor, and it's like $200 that I don't have. And and so the reaction of this is like, well, hey, if you've done some really amazing work and you've done some stuff before, you might get that get enough money in gift cards in order to buy that thing. And so that's I think that's really smart in the way they're doing it. We're definitely going to keep our eye on this. This is definitely going to be an evolving thing, because knowing ZeniMax, they might try and step in. Bethesda, we've said this before, Bethesda's run by, a lot of people who are just passionate about games and they don't really care about the inner politics of this stuff. ZeniMax is run by a bunch of ex-lawyers who seem to fill most of their time with filing, things because they want to.
It's really the business.
Yeah, and I mean, in
company.
two faces on the coin, you have on one side of the coin you have them protecting their assets, which is important. All companies need to do that, but on the other hand, they seem to go a little overboard from time to time, especially with some of their stuff is just like them trying to control the word scrolls. It's like, guys, come on, you can't
Yeah.
you can't copyright the word
really?
scrolls. Like, fuck me, guys, come on. That's going a little too far there. Please stop. That's just.
Is that why I no longer have a scroll lock key on my computer?
I guess. Mine says SCRL. And then LK. Maybe that's why. Maybe some people have put out come on, guys, come on, just take a step back, take a breath.
Yeah. So.
But anyways,
agreed.
We'll
hopefully they and hopefully there's no problems with it because it's just a good idea. And Bethesda, ZeniMax, if you're listening, one of the reason people love your games and buy your games so much is because of the ability to mod them. Don't mess with that. Don't do what EA is doing. Don't screw your fans. Don't try to screw your fans.
We also
make a few
know,
extra bucks. That's just not going to go well for you.
We also know what you're trying to do with the paid mod things, and yes, we understand. We get where you're coming from. We get why it's important for you to be able to monetize at least a portion of this. We understand, and it's convoluted and confusing, but we understand. We get it. So we're not naysayers to the whole concept of paid mods, and we understand that it's this is really in its infancy and difficult and.
Well, and I don't have a problem with that at all, as long as it's about them. If they stepped in and tried to mess with the Nexus, that I would have a very big problem with that.
And the other thing that I gotta point this out, guys, is stop copying popular mods on the Nexus that are free, and their creators have said that they're going to be free. You can't you can't do it for the games that are out. Stop doing it for the games that are out. Take those concepts and maybe import them to the next game, but don't step in and they announced this. This is a popular mod on the Nexus called Frostfall. It creates a temperature-based survival system in Skyrim. Makes sense because there's a lot of snow and ice and cold and stuff.
Yeah.
But for these, I don't know how you say it. For a lot of people out there, it's one of the best mods there is, and Bethesda took that concept and made their own version, which is almost identical to it, and they charged a lot of money for it. It's like, oh no, that's not. That's.
There is that dichotomy between the consoles and the PC players, though. I mean, this is the whole reason they gave the special edition, the new high res version of Skyrim.
There is a point. There is a point where it's like look, there's a couple of different ways to approach it, and that probably would be a smart idea.
Yeah, just because you can do something, just because you can charge console players for mods, doesn't mean you necessarily should.
There is a lot of mods that I would suggest that they should put up for free. I really they should contact some of these great mod creators and say, hey, we want to incorporate this, and we want to incorporate this for free. We promise you we'll never charge for it. It's a good idea. maybe we'll charge for it if somebody can do it in the next game, down the road. But because this is an existing thing, we'll just help you make your existing thing work because it's like one of the top 10 mods downloaded of all time. Then let's help you. And I think they should do that. I really do. But they shouldn't charge for it, and they certainly shouldn't make it. Basically, what the perception here is that they basically stole the concept. They stole a lot of the systems that the game runs on, and I think some of the coding now seems to be identical, like large sections of it. Stuff like that. It's the optics of it. It just makes it look bad.
The optics are bad.
So bad. Like, put out that mod for free and then make something that makes it better or corresponds with it, or something, and then you can charge for that one, and it's a win-win. You still make money, but you're not giving the optics that you're a greedy company now stealing somebody else's work. It's just bad. And like I said, this thing this is so in its infancy. There's so much growth to be happening here. It's anyway.
All right. Well, that's probably where we should call it. Yeah, we should call it there for today. This has been the Augmented Reality Podcast. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. This is a presentation of the Triple S League. You can check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, music videos, some comedy stuff, and we have got lots of exciting things planned for 2018. We've got some pretty interesting stuff in the works. Maybe some new faces around here. We shall see. If you appreciate this weekly content, you can support us on Patreon or use our Gawkbox link. You can find that in the description. Download an app or a game on your mobile phone. We get a kickback from that. It's an excellent way to support this channel. It doesn't cost you a thing, and they've actually got, it's not just like crap games on there or anything. There's some good apps and games that you can get on there. So anyway, my name is Ashenity, and on behalf of Subsidian, this has been the Augmented Reality Podcast. Probably the last one.
Thank you, everybody.
And yes, thank you. Wow. And we're on track to hit 15,000 subs by the new year, and which is incredible for December, the way that things have been growing. Thank you so much to everybody out there who is a new viewer, a new channel follower this month. It's fantastic. This is probably the last podcast for 2017, but there's more content coming in 2017, so keep an eye out for that, and we will talk to you later.